The little girl was crying so hard that she could barely breathe when she suddenly broke away from her billionaire mother, ran across the crowded charity courtyard, and threw her arms around a complete stranger. Her mother froze in horror, because for 3 years, her daughter had refused to let any unfamiliar man come within arm's reach of her. But the stranger did something even more shocking. He dropped to one knee, wrapped the trembling child in his arms, and held her with the quiet certainty of a man who had spent his life protecting people who could not protect themselves. Nobody in that courtyard knew that the single father comforting the billionaire's daughter was a former Navy SEAL carrying wounds far deeper than the scar beneath his sleeve. And nobody could have imagined that this single embrace would change 3 lives forever. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel so you can remain part of our family and our community. Vivienne Ashford was accustomed to people stopping when she entered a room. At 38, she had built Ashford Meridian into one of the most powerful private technology companies in the country, and newspapers often described her as brilliant, fearless, and impossible to intimidate. Yet none of those words mattered when it came to her 8-year-old daughter, Elodie. Elodie was the one person who could reduce Vivienne from a commanding billionaire executive to a frightened mother in seconds. The little girl had always been unusually sensitive to loud environments and unfamiliar people, but after losing her father when she was 5, something inside her had changed. She became guarded, withdrawn, and painfully selective about whom she trusted. Teachers called her exceptionally intelligent. Therapists described her as emotionally cautious. Vivienne simply called her wounded. She had spent years giving her daughter everything money could buy, while quietly fearing that none of it could give Elodie what she truly needed. That afternoon, Vivienne had brought Elodie to a community veterans charity event sponsored by the Ashford Foundation. The event filled a beautiful outdoor civic courtyard with families, volunteers, musicians, local firefighters, retired service members, and children carrying paper flags. The sun was warm, the sky clear, and everything had been carefully organized to make the day feel hopeful. Vivienne believed the event would be good for Elodie because it was centered on families and service. Instead, a sudden burst of applause near the main stage sent the little girl into panic. Elodie covered her ears, dropped the small paper flag she had been holding, and began crying. Vivienne immediately reached for her, but before she could calm her daughter, Elodie looked across the courtyard as though searching for someone she had never seen before. Then she ran. Vivienne shouted her name and followed, her expensive shoes striking the stone pavement as Elodie raced between tables. Volunteers moved aside in confusion. A security officer began moving toward the child, but before anyone could reach her, Elodie stopped beside a tall man standing near a veterans information booth. He was wearing a simple gray shirt, worn jeans, and work boots. His dark blonde hair was cut short, his face carried a few faint scars, and his posture had the unmistakable stillness of someone trained to notice everything around him. Beside him stood a little boy of about 6, holding a paper airplane and watching the crowd with innocent curiosity. The man turned when Elodie reached him. What happened next left Vivienne speechless. Elodie grabbed the stranger around the waist and buried her face against his chest. The man looked down in surprise, but he did not pull away. Instead, he slowly crouched until he was at the child's level. He placed one hand gently against her back and the other near her shoulder, giving her enough space to move away if she wanted. He did not ask what was wrong. He did not bombard her with questions. He simply stayed calm while she cried. His little boy watched quietly, then stepped closer and held out the paper airplane as though offering his own small solution to the crisis. Vivienne finally reached them, breathless and terrified. She expected Elodie to recoil when she touched her, as she often did during moments of panic. Instead, the girl held even tighter to the stranger. The man looked at Vivienne and immediately understood that she was the mother. His expression remained respectful and calm as he explained that he had not approached Elodie, she had come to him. Vivienne apologized repeatedly, but he brushed the apology aside and told her that the little girl simply needed someone to remain steady until her breathing slowed. There was something about his voice that unsettled Vivienne, not because it was threatening, but because it carried the quiet authority of someone who had witnessed fear before and learned not to fight it with more fear. His name was Callan Mercer. He was 36 years old, a single father, and the owner of a modest mobile repair business that specialized in restoring damaged equipment for local construction crews and small businesses. What Vivienne did not know was that Callan had once been a Navy SEAL. He had served overseas, completed missions he never discussed, and left the military after a devastating operation that had taken the lives of two men he considered brothers. He rarely mentioned his service because he did not want admiration, pity, or questions. After leaving the military, he had concentrated on raising his son, Wesley, and building a quiet life that did not require him to explain the past. Vivienne thanked him and tried to guide Elodie away, but the little girl refused to let go. That frightened Vivienne more than anything. Elodie had never willingly attached herself to a stranger so quickly. Callan noticed Vivienne's hesitation and gently told her that she should not force the child away while she was frightened. He suggested they move somewhere quieter together. Vivienne reluctantly agreed. For the next 20 minutes, Callan sat beneath a large tree with Elodie nearby while Wesley showed her how to fold the paper airplane. Callan barely spoke. He let the children control the pace. Gradually, Elodie stopped crying. Then something even more unexpected happened. She smiled. Vivienne stared at her daughter as though witnessing a miracle. That smile became the beginning of an unlikely friendship. Over the following weeks, Vivienne encountered Callan several more times through the Foundation's community programs. At first, she assumed it was coincidence. Then she discovered that Callan volunteered at several veterans events and quietly repaired donated equipment for community organizations. He never accepted payment when he knew an organization could not afford it. Vivienne, accustomed to people calculating every interaction around her wealth, found his indifference almost irritating. She offered to fund his workshop. He declined. She offered him a business partnership. He declined. She offered to pay for Wesley's educational expenses. He politely refused. Vivienne could not understand why anyone would turn down an opportunity that could change his life. Callan eventually explained that he did not want his son growing up believing that kindness was something purchased by wealthy people. He wanted Wesley to understand that a person could be generous without being powerful and strong without being rich. The word stayed with Vivienne because she realized she had spent years teaching Elodie the opposite lesson without ever intending to. Money had become her answer to everything. Callan became a quiet reminder that some wounds could not be solved by money. As Elodie began spending time around Callan and Wesley, her confidence slowly returned. She started talking more at school. She began participating in art activities again. She even asked Vivienne one afternoon if they could invite Callan and Wesley to lunch. Vivienne agreed, though she remained cautious. She knew nothing about Callan's past beyond the fact that he had served in the military. She did not know that his calmness had been forged through years of danger. Then one afternoon, everything changed. During a community event at a public park, a metal lighting structure suddenly became unstable after a support mechanism failed. A sharp sound sent several children running. Parents panicked. Before the event staff could react, Callan moved with astonishing speed. He pulled Wesley away from the danger zone, directed several children toward a safer area, and helped secure the collapsing structure until emergency workers arrived. His movements were precise, controlled, and almost instinctive. Vivienne saw something in his eyes after the danger passed. For the first time, she understood that Callan was not simply calm. He had been trained to survive chaos. Later that afternoon, Vivienne confronted him privately. She asked why he had never told her the truth about his military service. Callan admitted that he had nothing against his past, but he refused to let it become the only thing people saw when they looked at him. He was a father now. That mattered more to him than medals, missions, or stories from another life. Vivienne confessed that she had spent years trying to protect Elodie from every possible source of pain. Callan gently helped her understand that protection and control were not always the same thing. Sometimes, he said, children needed to know that the world contained danger but also good people capable of standing beside them when things became frightening. Those words struck Vivienne harder than any business criticism ever had. She realized she had been protecting Elodie from life itself. The most painful revelation came weeks later when Elodie finally explained why she had run to Callan that first day. She had remembered something about her father. Before his death, he had once taken her to a veteran center where she saw a former service member comforting a frightened child. Elodie had forgotten the man's face, but she remembered the feeling of safety. When she saw Callan standing beneath the tree, something about his posture reminded her of that memory. She had not run to a stranger. She had run toward a feeling she desperately needed. Vivienne broke down when she heard this. For years, she had believed that her daughter's grief was something she needed to fix. Instead, she finally understood that grief was not a broken machine. It was love with nowhere to go. That realization changed Vivienne. She began spending less time in executive meetings and more time at Elodie's school. She stopped checking her phone during meals. She listened when her daughter spoke instead of immediately offering solutions. She learned that sometimes the greatest gift a parent could give was not an answer, but attention. Callan changed too. For years, he had believed that keeping people at a distance protected them from the damaged parts of himself. But watching Vivienne learn to let people help her made him question his own walls. He began speaking more openly with Wesley about his military years in an age-appropriate way. He admitted that there were things he regretted, people he missed, and memories he would never forget. He also admitted that being a father had taught him something the military never could: surviving was not the same as living. One afternoon, several months after that first embrace, Vivienne, Elodie, Callan, and Wesley stood together at another community gathering. The same courtyard was filled with families, but this time Elodie was not hiding behind her mother. She was helping younger children fold paper airplanes while Wesley showed them how to make them fly farther. Vivienne watched Callan kneel beside a nervous little boy who was afraid to join the other children. Callan offered the same quiet patience he had once offered Elodie. The child eventually took his hand. Vivienne smiled. She realized the man who had once been a stranger to her daughter had become one of the safest people in their lives. But the greatest surprise came when Elodie walked over to Vivienne and slipped her small hand into her mother's. She looked at Callan, then at Wesley, and smiled before saying that she finally understood something. People could leave, she had learned, but that did not mean love disappeared. Vivienne knelt and hugged her daughter tightly, tears filling her eyes. She told Elodie that her father would always be part of her story, and that remembering him did not mean she had to remain trapped in sadness. Elodie could love the people she had lost and still make room in her heart for the people who were here. Callan stood nearby, quietly wiping his eyes. Vivienne looked at him and understood that second chances rarely arrived with dramatic announcements. Sometimes they arrived as a crying child running across a courtyard. Sometimes they looked like a single father with tired eyes and an old scar. Sometimes they came disguised as a person you would never have noticed if life had not forced your paths together. Vivienne had once believed her fortune made her powerful enough to protect everyone she loved. Callan taught her something far more valuable: no amount of money could guarantee a life without pain, but compassion could make pain easier to carry. And Callan, who had spent years believing that his best days were behind him, discovered that his past did not have to define his future. He could still build something beautiful. He could still love without fear. He could still be a father, a friend, and perhaps, one day, something more to the woman who had first seen him only as a stranger comforting her child. The four of them walked across the sunlit courtyard together, with Elodie and Wesley racing ahead and Vivienne and Callan following behind. There was no grand announcement, no perfect ending, and no promise that life would suddenly become easy. There were still scars, unanswered questions, and difficult days ahead. But there was something better than perfection. There was hope. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. And before you go, tell us in the comments what you believe the greatest lesson of this story was. Is true strength about protecting people from every hardship, or is it about standing beside them until they find the courage to face it themselves? Because sometimes the person who saves a child is not the richest person in the room, the most powerful person in the room, or even someone the child knows. Sometimes, the person who changes everything is simply the one who stays.